Good evening, everyone. This is Dolores Cannon again with the Metaphysical Hour. And I'm back live tonight. You know, last week I had my class, and so I wasn't able to do it live, so they used programs out of the archives. But now tonight we're live again, and I've got a special guest on tonight. What we're starting to do now is I am beginning to book some of the ones that the authors that we are just now publishing. So we're going to be a lot of new people that you haven't even heard of before. Let me give out the toll-free number first in case if somebody does want to call in and ask questions. Okay, the toll-free number is 877-876-5227. 877-876-5227, in case anyone does want to call in and ask any questions. And now speaking to my guest, if someone does call in, they make a little beep. Sometimes it's a little hard to tell, but then we'll know somebody's on the line. Okay, my guest tonight is Antoinette Lee Howard, and she is in Arizona. And we are just publishing her book. It's coming off the press now. But Antoinette, you're there, aren't you?
I certainly am, and I'm glad to have the chance to talk with you, Dolores, and with your audience.
Okay. Because, like I said, we're starting to do some of the new books that we haven't had the authors on here before. And, you know, the subject tonight is going to be about fear. And I know, you know, when somebody hears that word, it really causes a reaction in people. You know, as writers, we know the power of words. And sometimes just to hear the word fear is kind of like an icy hand on your heart. And when I go through hundreds of manuscripts that are submitted to me all the time for publication, and I pick the ones to publish. And when I first saw this book, the title is Journey Through Fear. I think I had the same reaction a lot of people do, was I don't know if I want to write about that subject or to publish that subject. But whenever I read the book, it's really a very beautiful book and has a lot of very important points. But first, Antoinette, I want you to tell everybody about yourself. Let's give some of your background.
Sure, and I definitely agree with you, Dolores. It isn't a subject I would have chosen. This is a channel book, and it was it came at a time in my life when I didn't necessarily want it. Well, whoever wants to really hear about fear. In fact, I think it's so much a part of the human condition, and it's nothing we ever really talk about, even often to one another, and particularly men. I think men are often, you know, enjoined to keep a stiff upper lip and so forth. As women, we can maybe talk about it a little bit more, but I don't think we talk about it either. So yes, no. I was in a really tough spot in my life. Specifically, you asked me about my background. I am a writer and a painter, and I was actually, when the book began, as I said, it is channeled. I was at an uncomfortable spot, I guess we can say. My husband had died very suddenly in his mid-50s, and we were both working, but we had a dream together to travel the country and write travel articles. He was a photographer, a news photographer, and I a writer and a painter, and we figured we could make it work. Well, of course, he never had the chance to do that, and I just decided it was going to be, then it was going to be my journey. But I basically was going to write about and illustrate articles about plants. So,
that he couldn't do it with you.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And seeing him die relatively young, really got me to thinking that life is short and uncertain. So I basically paid the medical bills and saved some money and went on my own. Started working on my own. Left my job, went on my own. And it was at that point that the communications began. So I would have welcomed. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm jumping on your words here. Excuse me.
That's one thing we got to watch. I'm on a speakerphone, so if we have to speak, otherwise we don't for each other. But that's. I remember in the book it was very unusual. Like you said, this is not something you set out to do. Let's tell people how it happened. How you came to write the book, how you got the information. Because you don't just normally channel, do you? No, I hadn't really done it at all before this. So this was a first for me. Having made this decision that I was going to work on my own, at that point the communications began. Once I left my job and started writing articles about the healing properties of plants and illustrating them. And frankly, I would have welcomed communications. I started hearing what I can best describe that as a flow of thoughts that seemed to need to be written down. So I decided to go ahead and do it. I really would have welcomed help, say, with my art. At first, I thought I might be tapping into some sort of communication about my art or about the flowers themselves, but it turned out to be communications about fear. So I like to think that I didn't get what I wanted, but I got what I needed. At that point, it was it was time. It was time to start thinking about it. And we get what we need, even though it's the last thing we would think of.
Yes, yes. Certainly don't want it. I have a quote here. I began hearing from two primary voices. I call them voices because I receive the messages as a flow of ideas or words. They're not really voices, but they are words. You know, it is definitely a flow of ideas that wasn't my own. One is Merlin, the Merlin, and that was amazing to me. He lived. Now, this was a man who actually lived, not just an invention of storytellers. And he was a shaman and an advisor to King Arthur. After Arthur died, he went to live with other people in the Alps who had discovered the key to long life. He lived 600 years. He tells us we can live as basically by choice as long as we want. And also, yes, yes.
600 years? Oh.
600, approximately, yes. And he made the decision to become a diva, which in Sanskrit means shining one. They are in the angelic hierarchy. And they work with large forces and flows, if you will, things like the Gulf Stream and the jet stream and our oceans and the Earth's core even. They also work with landscape elements like the divas at the Findhorn Garden in Findhorn, Scotland. Worked with divic guides to make a marvelous garden. families of plants and animals, mineral deposits, even the flow of the seasons. These are Devic guides. Merlin's particular job, if you will, or the one he chose and was allowed to do, is as the guardian of communication. In other words, he helps us find our truth in words, although
but
it can also...
You also had other divas that were communicating, too.
Yes.
Merlin.
Yes. Actually, the other primary voice is the guardian of water, the water that percolates down into the earth's, into the rocks. And he's called the guardian, or I call him, the guardian of water clarification. So these two main voices walked me through the process of understanding fear and basically stayed with me as I wrote the book. They didn't tell me how to write it. I can't tell you how many times I told them I needed an outline. That really wasn't their purview. They just figured that if I got it, readers would get it. But they definitely told me they wanted a book written. They actually...
Whenever this all began, how did you feel when you first began hearing the voices and this information began coming through?
Uncomfortable. Definitely uncomfortable. I was still writing articles about plants and illustrating them. And then I was also getting these messages. The one thing, though, they assured me that if I ever decided I didn't want to do it anymore, it was okay. There wasn't a problem. They would simply stop. Yeah. So there wasn't, there was no onus put on me to do it specifically. And yet I was fascinated. I have to tell you, I was just fascinated. Whenever the book was finished, then did they just leave? Did they stop communicating with you? For the most part, yes. I still get some messages, but no, they're not as one-pointed as the messages were for Journey Through Fear. Once I felt that I was done, then that was, the messages didn't particularly stop, but the messages on fear stopped.
Maybe that's at the point that you got what you needed from it also.
I had to live it, absolutely. And I frankly still am living it. I tend to think of it as a lifetime journey, that it's something you fall back into, and you, as our president said, pick yourself up and dust yourself off, and then continue from there. Yeah.
But that's what I'm always telling everyone. Fear is the strongest emotion a human has. Mm-hmm. It's paralyzing, and it's also destructive. Mm-hmm. Because it can just stop you from doing what you really need to do.
Yes.
It's important to understand what it is. Mm-hmm. And I think you've done a wonderful job here writing about it. Let's go ahead and talk about then some of the things that they told you they wanted you to write about fear.
Yes, sure. I'd be glad to. The first thing I think is an important place to start is defining fear. And because it's nebulous. We know what it is. We experience it, that tightening in the chest or the belly, or generally in that area anyway, although people may have it in other areas. Fear is judgment and a sense of separation from other people and other life. Judgment with a sense of separation is fear. It is counterposed against love, which is acceptance and a sense of union. And again, that's with other person and other people, could be a cause, and ultimately a union with God, if that is your belief system.
Yeah.
And the big difference between the two, or they hinge on change. Anytime change comes into our lives, and that could be, the least little thing, my TV breaks or something like that, to life and death. Any change, big or small, can trigger, I should say, fear. And the key is that fear always has to do with a person. Always. Even if you think it's a huge, great, big, global warming, who would you even begin to blame for global warming? There's a person's picture in your mind, a picture of a person in your mind. If you're judging that person, the key is impersonalizing, calling global warming, the result of a way of thinking, rather than, say the CEO of a large polluting corporation. And that is, it hinges on whether we can impersonalize versus judgment, which always has a person in mind. Always. This was a tremendously hard concept for me. We must have gone over this one dozens of times before I got it. The book is edited. I've been a writer and an editor for a long time, and I asked them if I could edit out the extra, and they said, "It's your book. Do what you want with it." So
true.
Yes.
But
so
I was just now
the beginning.
I was just now thinking of phobias, where people are afraid of things.
Mm-hmm.
That would go with the concept of judgment. I'm thinking fear of spiders, fear of spiders, fear of snakes, of fire.
Yeah.
How does that go along with judgment?
Okay, a lot of our fear, and we have, at this point, made a judgment. The spider is back, and I'm afraid of the spider, whatever. But a lot of our fears come from childhood, and the image that we have of ourselves as we grow up as children. It's a time in our lives when we feel pretty powerless. I mean, we're just kids, and
we feel very vulnerable.
Yes, absolutely, and so. Believe it or not, there's a person behind that spider somewhere.
Yeah.
It could be, my mother locked me in or left me in my room alone, and a spider bit me. It could be any number of things, but it's not only fear of the spider. You're judging a person, and I know it's still a tough concept for me, especially in that kind of a context.
Yeah, we're going to make
I've just come to believe it.
We're going to make some people think a little differently, I think.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, another thing I wanted you to bring up, you were talking in the book about fear pairs.
Mm-hmm.
That on your list of what you were going to talk about?
I'd be delighted to.
Pairs. What?
Yes, I'd be delighted to.
That's what you call it in the book, fear pairs. Yes.
Mm-hmm. There are 3 levels of fear. If you can think of fear like an egg, a cross-section of an egg, with maybe this is a magic egg because it can be healed, but if you think of it as the cross-section of an egg, it begins with judgment. And judgment is not fear itself. It is a reaction to a change that's taking place in your life. And the judgments are right and wrong, good and bad. Those are the pairs. And the pairs continue throughout our travel through the egg, if you will. In other words, if you're judging something as even good, something good, like I'm say an architect building a skyscraper, and it's got to be good, because this is my way of living depends on this. Hiding in back of that judgment is also bad. In other words, you're scared that you're not going to do it right. So judgment begins the process. It's the yolk of the egg, if you will.
Okay.
And then you travel into immediately, within seconds, once you've made a judgment, good, bad, right, wrong, you immediately travel into fear itself, or the white of the egg, if you will. It's all based, every bit of fear that we have is all based on what I call the core fear pair, and that's what you had asked about, of powerlessness and strength. In other words, if you feel powerless, there's also a well of strength in you that you fear. And it can take a number of forms that maybe are more easily understood than powerless and strength, but it can be lack and abundance. In other words, if you're worrying about dwindling savings and you win the lottery, say, to the tune of $1 million, how's your life going to change when that happens? So you're fearing lack, but you're also fearing abundance. Failure and success is another pair.
It can also be fear of abundance, because what will you do with that?
Exactly. Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yes, absolutely. And you hear about people who win the lottery who, when faced with abundance, lose their money, through one, bad investments, any number of things, because they haven't dealt with the fear, associated with their newfound abundance. Yes. I'm sorry. Yeah.
This would be one of the things that would keep people from accumulating money, because they are really subconsciously afraid of what will happen if they do have it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Keep them from accumulating it because of the fear.
Yes. Yes. It is amazing how it permeates our lives. Even good things, or what we judge as good things versus bad things.
Yeah.
Other ones are failure and success, aging and youth, and sickness and health, with the primal fear being life and death. In other words, whenever you're scared of one thing, there's a fear of life as well as death in there, and it is operative when we're in this. I guess you can think of the yolk as breaking into the white, and now it all becomes yellow, and these are the major kinds of fears that we deal with once we've made a judgment.
That's what I mean. It seems like just about everything does have an opposite then.
Yes. I say he, but the divas, of course, have no gender per se. It's these two voices sounded masculine to me, and of course, I asked Merlin about that. And he said that because he was a man for so long, he identifies with that gender. But basically, they don't have a gender. And when they look at us, they don't see say me as a woman or you as a woman. They more see the amount of light or darkness in us, fear or love, basically. They don't particularly see people. Yeah.
Because essentially we are a spirit, and that spirit has no gender anyway.
Yes,
we just go
right.
different bodies taking on different forms.
Yes. It's certainly amazing to me to hear about this. I guess one of the things that really surprised me was hearing that I was, not only fearing what I thought was negative, and for me, at this period of my life in particular, when I was getting started, lack and abundance were the big ones. So, but to realize that I was also afraid of abundance was an amazing understanding. And that even life and death go together, and there they used the concept of a person being healed of a terminal illness. In other words, life. In this case, yes, the fear of death wouldn't have to be faced, but what kinds of issues do you face when you suddenly face life again? When you thought, and when those who are near and dear to you thought you were going to die, do they begin? Yeah. Do they begin to build different lives? Yeah. Sorry, I'm stepping on your words again.
That's okay. No, I'm doing it too. That's the problem with a speakerphone. But yeah, because you had already accepted the one and maybe thinking you deal with it, and then now it's a turnaround that you have to go the other direction.
Yes, right. And some people, just do make the decision to die too. They also talked about that people, that is a choice that we have. And, yes. And without all the fear, in other words, at the level of stress that we live in, our bodies also tend to break down, as you said earlier, with stress. And so if we can eliminate some fear from our lives, we're also expanding our lives, not only, mentally, but also physically. They gave me an incredible statistic, Dolores. We spend 75% of our waking hours in fear, on average.
Oh, that's a lot. That's a lot. I didn't realize
it's a lot. Much. Yes, it is. Yes. Yeah, on average.
What would we be afraid of that we would be spending 75% of our time?
Yeah, fear comes in many guises. Many times, it's not even your own. It could be anything. It could be an attitude of your country toward another country, or your society toward another society. Might be a better way of putting it. It could be an attitude that you inherit from your family. The spiders, could be also something that you pick up from your parents, the fear of spiders. There are so many things that we're not even aware that we're judging. And of course, judgment is the step into fear. For example, the news may come on and somebody may say something about the World Trade Center, and immediately we're maybe not even realizing it, but we're judging, the people who, or that we, think bombed the World Trade, or the airplanes that hit, that were responsible for that that disaster. So it hits us in subtle ways all through the day. And getting past it is difficult because they use the image of a fish in water. What does a fish know of air? Water is its life. Yeah. And if a turtle were to tell a fish that you can be in water as well as on land, and in air, would a fish even really understand it? So we have a big journey in that it's all around us. We have a big journey.
Well, I just keep thinking of that 75% of the time. It would think that some of the time we would be enjoying ourselves or, thinking of things, thinking of good things.
Absolutely,
it might be on another level then, I guess, that this fear exists and we're not aware of it.
Yeah, I think so. It surrounds us. And they liken it also to carrying a 50-pound suitcase filled with granite. Not even diamonds, granite.
It'd be better if it was diamonds. So we'd like the diamonds.
Yes, we would appreciate those. Wouldn't mind carrying them. So their advice is to put it down as often as possible and begin to live another way.
When you were talking about the fear pairs of how we're afraid of either one, even the polar opposites, isn't there a neutral ground where we could exist without being afraid of, the one or the other?
Yes, and it comes back.
Middle ground,
Yes, and that is acceptance. In other words, if you can they throughout the conversations, they helped me to understand ways that I and I hope readers can go past fear, particularly when you're in this, the yellow has gotten into the white of the egg and you're living in fear. And their first recommendation is that we recognize the physical and mental signs of fear. You're going to feel fear as you're actually going to feel judgment too. When you make a judgment, there's a subtle tightening, and it varies from person to person, but generally it's in the area between the abdomen, the stomach, perhaps the chest area. You can begin to feel a little tightening. I myself notice it when I get to the fear spot. I don't often notice judgments, but I do notice this tightening, and for me, it's in my stomach. I'll notice a tightening in my stomach along with a feeling of fear. And that's actually the first sign. When you do that, when you're there, you say, aha, I'm here. And if you can, then you name it. Okay, what am I afraid of? Am I afraid of success and failure? Am I afraid of sickness and health? That's a big one. Exactly what is it? Am I afraid of lack and abundance? And name it as two, because it's there. If one's there, the other. And then go back.
Isn't that the part of us that we call the solar plexus?
Yes, absolutely.
That would be that area.
The third chakra, right? Yeah. That's a big place to feel it. Although some people feel it higher up in the chest area. It just varies by person. And so at that point, you begin dismantling. You just say, okay, what is it I'm scared of, and what judgment and what person is behind it? That's the hard one to find. And at that point, if you bring it to light, it goes away. It's like many things, once we acknowledge them, they begin to become less prominent in our thinking. And with luck, we can all stop fear at that stage at which, the judgment has been made, and now we're in the white of the egg, which is all tainted with the yellow of the judgment, because there's the third stage of fear too, and that's the fear behavior. And that's where we get into wars and, every schoolyard fights and everything else. There's the behaviors. You can I guess it's still using the concept of the egg. At that point, the shell has broken, and we begin to affect other people with what are called the fear behaviors. And again, these are they have the word "and" between them. If you're angry, you're also depressed. If you're trying to control your world, you're also feeling like it's victim. There's a third one called the whirlwind, which is tends to be my personal favorite. I'm sorry to say, it's when you're busy to the point of exhaustion, and then the other side of it is depletion. And then there's.
You mean you're trying to keep so busy so you won't think about it? Exactly.
Okay. Yes. And then the fourth one is living in the past or the future instead of the present. And,
okay, explain that.
Yeah, that is was a hard one for me too. Merlin gave me a couple wonderful stories. And, I can read them if you'd like me to, or otherwise I can just tell you about them.
Yeah, just go ahead and tell us. Okay.
Okay. One was what he called the knight's story. And this had to do with a knight in King Arthur's, a member of King Arthur's Round Table. And this man, called Thomas, was sure that the Holy Grail was in the British Isles. And so he put on the robe of a mendicant monk and traveled the British Isles to find it. Now, Merlin doesn't particularly thinks of the Holy Grail more as a symbol rather than a reality. But that being said, this man Thomas did not feel that way. He felt it was a reality. And in a little church in Scotland, he found what he thought was the Grail. In fact, he saw a miracle performed with it. And at that point, he began to have second thoughts. And so he told the priest that he should be very careful of this very sacred cup because someone could come in and steal it. The priest got scared, went into fear, told the sheriff, and the sheriff arrested this knight. Now begins some political intrigues. Thomas was a bargaining chip. And Arthur did, spent a lot of money, got him back to the Round Table, but he also felt that he had to execute him because this just wasn't something. He couldn't be considered a strong ruler and have this man who had cost him so much time and money alive. Well, Merlin stepped in and spirited Thomas away. Thomas, make it a long story short, Thomas went to Merlin's kin in Wales and basically was given carte blanche for a new life. And instead, he couldn't live it. He basically retreated into himself, into drink, into thoughts of grandeur about how Arthur was going to come and rescue him and he would have a change of heart and so forth, and basically died a broken man with one bright spot, a young boy who served him like a son. And when Thomas died, no one ever believed him in Wales. They just didn't believe him. They didn't believe he was strong enough in mind or body to have ever been a Knight of the Round Table. And so he died a forgotten man, and the young boy who had served him like a son took what he had, took what Thomas's gifts were to him in the form of these stories of the olden times, and became a troubadour. So that was the man who lived in the past. And he gave another story of a man who lived in the future, on the basically on the Santa Maria, coming to the New World, and a sailor who he knew the world was round because he'd been a sailor all his life, but he retreated into the old fears that were prevalent in the time of the world being a rotating platter and there being a great big waterfall. So instead of enjoying his journey to the New World, he kept waiting for the waterfall. He was on the journey of a lifetime, but he didn't live on that boat. He lived in the waterfall, which of course wasn't there, but that's 20/20 hindsight, He was living. He wasn't living in the present. Neither one of them were in the present. They're living the past or the future. Yes, right.
We know so many people like that in our own lives that all they talk about is what they had done, who they were, in the past, and yet the future, the present is slipping away because they're living in the past.
Yes. And
or what I will someday in the future, and so I see what you mean, and they're not really living at all. No, they're not. And that's one of the fear, the major fear behaviors, and of course anger and depression and control and victimization are other big ones. Those are the two that tend to more spread out into the world, and in countries or in, big organizations of many kinds. You find people dealing with control and also, with anger and retaliation and so forth. And those are fear behaviors. Yeah. That's one of the things that I write and lecture about, too, is that I tell people not to buy into the fear tactics that are on TV. We hear all the time. They keep talking about the economy as it's collapsing, the stock market, and all fear tactics. And you don't have to buy into that.
We surely don't.
You can look at it, but you don't have to say, oh, my gosh, I'm going to lose everything because everything is collapsing around. It's a choice which way you want to go.
Exactly. And if you can somehow impersonalize it and just say, well, instead of, say, blaming the company or the president or, whatever picture is at the base of the initial judgment you made of bad, if you can impersonalize it as saying, this is something that's happening now. It's all people have everything in them. We have, the divas call us, the greatest saints, as well as, we're Jesus Christ as well as Attila the Hun. We have those dualities within us. And if you can somehow go beyond those, that's the key to finding a sense of freedom from these fears that just say, well, it's part of the human condition. What am I going to do about it? They used what I thought was a good example. Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans caused so much damage, and I believe it was the Guardian of Water Clarification was talking about that in terms of, if you don't go beyond a judgment of, say, you can judge any number of things. The government is one for not going in quick enough or not doing things, basically, once you make a judgment and you're also seeing a person when you think of the government. It isn't just a nameless government. It's you also kind of stop yourself from helping. In other words, the people who could, go to New Orleans and help the people there clean up the city were those who could say, okay, this is something that happened. I'm not blaming the government. I'm just going to help. Because sometimes we use blame and fear as a way not to do anything. We just sort of, we just sort of sit there.
That's one thing that I would talk about. We do create our reality. We create our world we live in, our own personal world. And that's why I said, you want to buy into this fear and make your world a negative world, or do you want it to be a positive world?
Yes.
We have enough power to do that.
Yes,
we just don't realize. We don't understand the power we really have.
Yes, yes.
I'd rather live in a positive world.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. It is so it's so important. In fact, they actually give a way to live more happily, what they call a circle of happiness. And I thought it was helpful enough to me that I put it in the book too, as a way, as a way to live. And one of the really important things is one of the littlest things, to smile.
What's that?
Merlin made the point that our smile is the body working as a teacher to the mind to say that there's nothing that's dangerous or disastrous or anything else out the door right now. Yeah. So that the smile is a very powerful tool, believe it or not, for people. It's something or at least I anyway, totally overlooked the value of the body teaching the mind. And another one, of course, is blessing. The blessing or the prayer of blessing, or however any of us expresses honor of other people and places, and even just the beauty of a summer day. The blessing is important, and not blaming ourselves is a real big one. We don't, we live in this atmosphere of fear. It's where we were born. If you believe in reincarnation, or we came, whether or not you believe in reincarnation, we came here to do a particular job, and so. Just get on with our jobs. And then the other thing is silence each day. And they break it down into active silence, which is doing something you love, like cooking or walking or whatever brings you joy. And then reflective silence, which can lead to meditation, but it also can be something as simple as reading a good book. Or reading some uplifting book, whatever it is. But they suggest that we put silence into our lives each day too, and as a way of expanding.
They're simple things, but they're very important things.
That
get overlooked, because that's what I said. The fear is paralyzing, and then you don't grow.
Yeah.
And one thing I've found, that the thing we fear the most, sooner or later we're going to have to face it. You can't get away from it. And then either conquer it or it conquers you. And which way do you live?
Right. It does. It is there. You're right. And
it's a test, and eventually we have to face it. So
Yes.
It's better if we can recognize that. Well, I'm watching the clock because we're going to have to go up. It's amazing. See, it's already been an hour.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
But if people, the book is called Journey Through Fear, and the author is Antoinette Lee Howard. If anybody wants to contact you, do you want them to contact you directly, or do you want them to go through us? How do you want them to do it?
Oh, okay. I have a Yahoo address.
Okay, you want to give out?
Yeah, sure. Be glad to. It's Devic, D-E-V-I-C, messages, all one word, Devic messages at yahoo.com. And I'll be happy to answer emails, sure.
Devas, D-E-V?
D-E-V-I-C. M-E, Devic, yes, messages.
Messages.
A plural on messages, yes, at yahoo.com.
Okay, because when the book comes out, you're going to get a lot of people wanting to talk to you and wanting to write to you, and that's very important.
Sure.
All right.
Yes.
And if anybody wants any more information, they can always check out our website. It's Ozark Mountain Publishing, and that is abbreviated, OZARKMT.com. Or if you're overseas, it's OZARKMT.com. And you can get all the information about the books and all the events that are coming up. But Antoinette, I want to really thank you for coming on tonight.
Oh, I thank you for having me. This has been delightful.
Yes, and you've done a really good job.
I
okay, and it's
time your faith in the fact that people will want to learn about fear. I hope so. I hope that I can help.
That's why I published the book. I think it's a very important message to get out there. All right, so now it's time to go, so I'm going to say good night to everyone and have a good evening and until next week.
If you enjoyed the show, check out more of our other videos and be sure to subscribe and click the like button. Thank you for listening to the Metaphysical Hour with Dolores Cannon.